Welcome, 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 and two more welcomes. Welcome and welcome for everybody joining us in our part of our continuing series where we talk to anybody on the left, anybody on the right, professors, academics, activists, people who just care as long as they can form complete thoughts. We want to provide them to you unedited and unaltered so that you can make up your own mind and do this thing that was popular back when I was in high school called thinking for yourself. Maybe it will come back. Maybe it won't. With us, it is our privilege to have today Tessa Jolls, President and CEO, Center for Media Literacy. Now, that is medialit.org. I know many of you are going to want to check this out. The website is medialit.org. That's medialit.org. It's going to be on the title bar on the below. What is the Center for Media Literacy? A pioneer in its field, the Center for Media Literacy is an educational organization that provides leadership, public education, professional development, and evidence-based educational resources nationally and internationally. Dedicated to promoting and supporting media literacy education as a framework for assessing, analyzing, evaluating, creating, and participating with media content, CML works to help its citizens, especially the young, develop critical thinking and media production skills needed to live fully in the 21st century media culture. Tessa Jolls is the president and CEO of the Center for Media Literacy. She's held that position since 1999. She founded the Consortium for Media Literacy, a nonprofit which provides research and publications. She's a contributing scientist at UC Louvain, Belgium. During her tenure at CML, Jolls' primary focus is working in partnership to demonstrate how media literacy works through school and community-based implementation programs. She actively contributes to the development of the media literacy field internationally through speaking, writing, and consulting with curriculum development and research projects. She was awarded the Fulbright NATO Security Studies Award in Brussels in 2021. Wow. And she taught the first media literacy undergraduate course at the University of Latvia, Faculty of Social Sciences in 2019. She also served in 2019 Fulbright Specialist for a 2-week assignment in Bulgaria. She served on the International Steering Committee for UNESCO's Global MIL Alliance as co-chair for the Digital and Media Literacy Working Group, organized the Children and Screens Initiative, which resulted in a pediatrics paper recommending research and policy priorities for the field. Among other initiatives in 2016, Jolls organized the Commit to Media Lit campaign to recognize Media Literacy Week. She also received the Global Media and Information Literacy Award from UNESCO Integrated GAP-MIL in cooperation with the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, UNAOC. In 2014, Jolls was honored with the International Media Literacy Award by Gateway Media Literacy Partners. In 2013, she was recognized with the Jesse McCants Award for individual contributions to media literacy by the National Telemedia Council. She was also invited to attend the Stanford Graduate School of Business Executive Education, WICT Senior Executive Summit. She has created the concept, co-authored, and published the CML Media Lit Kit, a collection of media literacy resources featuring professional development and curricular materials. The resources all center around CML's research-based framework for media literacy education. We'll leave it there. But before we get into more of what CML is, let's check in and see how we did. How did I get anything wrong about your introduction? Is there something that we need to correct?
No, it was fine, Marcus. Made me a little tired when I thought about everything, but it was fine.
What is media literacy? You and I talked for about an hour, and I got a good education. I was coming in thinking it was this, it was that, and a lot of my opinion was based upon the other interviews that I'd done and the reading that I'd done. But you had what I found to be sort of a unique presentation opinion about this. What is media literacy? What are you trying to do? And as you explained to me, what are you not trying to do? What does it not solve?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, we have the traditional definitions up on our website. But in the context that we've been talking, Marcus, I really see media literacy as a very important risk management strategy that every citizen really needs to learn. And you had mentioned earlier about the work that I did at NATO, and it's very interesting in terms of NATO's perceptions about media literacy, because they also see media literacy as being very important to citizenship and to the resiliency of citizens. And they see media literacy as being something that's absolutely critical for the cultural fabric. In other words, it's something that we need for everyday living. And so I think those are the thoughts that I think need to be in people's minds when they think about media literacy, how important it is to understand our risks when we engage with media.
Why does NATO concerned about this? If you could talk to me like I've been in a cave the last 5 years, why does NATO care about media literacy? They just want people to be more educated and better informed, or is there something more that they're concerned about?
Well, certainly, I think a lot of the original impetus behind their interest came through the whole notion of the prevalence of misinformation, disinformation, the propaganda coming in from foreign actors, that propaganda being everywhere. I mean, we don't realize to the extent that it's actually present in our own media ecosystem here in the United States, but
Thank you.
it's present everywhere in the world. And so it's absolutely critical that citizens have skills of discernment. But I also want to emphasize that it's not just a risk in the negative sense, it also is in the positive sense. And so that's why NATO and other organizations like our US State Department, who has done a lot of work in media literacy throughout the world, the reason that they're behind it is because they see media literacy as a way to help people be empowered to positively use media and to then be able to better assess the risks, the downsides of media as well. So they're not about saying media is bad. It's really more about how can citizens productively use media, and how can we really strengthen ourselves as citizens and as a nation.
Let me try to summarize what I learned in the last hour, and then you tell me how close I got, if that's fair.
Sure.
Um, while a lot of people, professors, academics, politicians, experts in the news might be saying, oh, social media is turning us on each other. If we just got rid of social media, everything would be fine. What you're saying is people have the right to speak. And sometimes they're going to say things you don't want to hear. And sometimes groups that are disenfranchised finally get enough attention to their issues and they want change. LGBTQ, BLM, etc. And so it's not, yes, fake news is out there. Yes, misinformation is out there. But what's most important is that you learn how to be a responsible, mature citizen in our modern day and age, and you have a maturity and somewhat of an education about all the data you're taking in, all the information that you're taking in, and how much you let it affect you, how much you let it make you emotional, and that you also realize you have got to live with other people who are going to say things that you don't like and occasionally have different opinions than you. And that's as important of coming to terms to than just focusing strictly on misinformation from a foreign government. Am I close? Please correct me. We learned a lot recently. I did.
I think you summarized things very well, Marcus.
Thank you.
Because definitely when we look at media, it's not so much about media as it is about education, about understanding ourselves, about understanding how the media system works, about understanding how other people respond to media as well. So it's not at all about the media. It really is about us. It's about our reactions to media, how we engage with it, how we process it, how we use it, what impact it has on us, not necessarily trying to control what's out there and what the media ecosystem is comprised of, but instead learning to deal with it, learning to use it from a positive standpoint, and certainly try to avoid the risks or the downsides.
I felt that to be a interesting and intelligent and insightful and unfortunately unique position from this interview series. Everybody's like, oh, those people over there, they're the bad ones. And if they just stop what they're doing bad, everything poof goes right back together. Or social media is here. And if we just got rid of social media like we were in 2014, poof, everything's back together. And I'm hearing you say, look, you can't stop machines from being built. You can't stop the future from evolving. You can't stop other voices. There's going to be a lot of voices. There's going to be even more information. We don't live in the 3 television networks time anymore. And we also can't put Pandora back in her box. So you're going to have to learn to live with a lot of different media coming at you and learn how to be a more mature and sophisticated consumer.
Yes. And user and producer and participant. Exactly. Because our engagement with media is not passive. We're not just sitting there taking in whatever anybody shovels at us. We're very actively engaged with it. I like to say that videos, for example, videos don't have feelings. They're things. They're there, but they're a thing. And it's us who has the feeling. It's us who has the experience and the knowledge. And so it's us that we need to be concerned about. It's us that we need to really help learn some skills, learn some processes, learn some ways of being able to think critically, to be able to take apart the media and understand it on a deeper level so that we're in charge, not the media.
I forget if it's an old Roman phrase or an old English phrase. I have met the enemy and they are us. Someone said that before.
True, and it's very apt in this situation because, again, by pointing the fingers and always saying, oh, it's so polarized, your facts are right, mine are wrong, you're saying mine are wrong, yours are wrong, all of that. We have to acknowledge that no information is perfect. There is no perfect information. And when it comes to seeking truth, certainly we want that ideal and we want to always try to ascribe to that. And yet at the same time, how many times have we seen that eyewitnesses to events will have different interpretations?
Oh, yeah. 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 And how many times have we seen in our modern media climate where people are looking at the same event and coming to 2 different, radically different conclusions about it?
Absolutely. And so we know from experience, from what we've seen, and we know scientifically even that different people are going to have different opinions, they're going to have different experiences, they're going to have different understanding. And we need to accept that and respect it. And by saying that, you're wrong and I'm right, it's only going to increase the polarization. Plus, we have to look at the advent of new technology. For example, AI. We
Mm.
know that AI is not based always on fact or
What?
exactly, I mean, uh, in fact, there have been some situations where things have been totally made up through AI because AI draws upon what's already out there on the internet and it doesn't make judgments about it. And it's not possible for it to make judgments. Therefore, we have to accept that we're coming across a lot of information that's almost impossible to verify. So, what do we do?
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. What do we do?
Yeah. And that's where I'm not saying it's the silver bullet or that it won't, but at the same time, what it does is give some tools for discernment so that hopefully you have some ways that if you care to invest the time and effort, you can learn some ways to better verify information. Most importantly, you learn some very quick skills to evaluate information for yourself according to your values, according to what you know from your own experience, your own education and learning. And so that's why I like to think of it as risk management, because we only can approximate what we think may be the validity of certain information. And so by educating ourselves with media literacy processes, we are better equipped to kind of make some of those judgments about how we want to accept information and how we want to deal with it.
And this is the 5 key questions, as you educated me, that you really try to zone in. And this attachment here is both if you're looking at media and consuming it, or if you're producing media. There seems to be the 5 key questions somewhat slightly varied, and they look at authorship, format, audience, content, and purpose. And they appear to be authorship. Who created this message?
Mhm.
Format. What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? Audience. How might different people understand this message differently? Content. What values, lifestyles, and points of view are represented in this or omitted from this message? And purpose. Why is this message being sent? And I think you were saying if people just started learning how to ask these 5 questions every time they read something, or conversely, were producing something, we might have not perfect, but a more media literate population. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. And what we are really looking for is to help people to ask questions, and to give them a guiding kind of light in terms of which questions to start with. Because we know we could ask question after question after question, but where do you start? And that's what so often overwhelms people. They don't know where to start. So these are valid ways of starting. And by continuing to apply these questions in practice and learn how to use these questions in any media, what we're looking for are habits of mind so that people automatically start questioning. If you see something and you want to invest some time in exploring it, well, then by all means, ask questions and start with some really important questions. So that's it. It can become a very quick process, almost like we call it a heuristic, a habit of mind, that immediately when people learn to use these questions and these concepts, they automatically start taking things apart right away.
And there's only 5 questions, and they're not rocket science with multi-part answers. It seems relatively simple. I think I know the answer to this question, but let me ask you then. We have the highest amount of educated Americans, college educated Americans in American history. We have the highest amount of reporters and news reporters employed ever in American history. And yet it looks like nobody knows how to do this. Is that fair? Or should I say, hey, if you have a college degree or you work in the news, we can automatically assume that you know these 5 questions and you know how to cipher out the media? Or is that not accurate?
Well, people don't typically know about media literacy, and they certainly haven't been taught media literacy foundational concepts from schooling, because it hasn't been taught in our K-12 education system. And so we're looking at a discipline that's emerged probably maybe 50, 60 years ago. And it's been gradually progressing. And so definitely there's more awareness now, but I've certainly talked to university faculty, to journalists, to policymakers, to teachers, librarians, you name the group. And there's very little awareness of media literacy. And there aren't many universities, frankly, where you can even learn about media literacy.
In education, um, and there's little places you can go to actually study this in college.
That's right. Yeah, there are. I can think of one or two schools of education that even have a media literacy class, and unfortunately, when you look at media, when you look at how we learn, we are definitely moving to situation where content is infinitely available on the internet, right? You can find out about anything. Look it up. All right. But the process skills of learning how to learn, these process skills, inquiry, of learning to ask questions, of exploration, of finding information that's relevant to whatever you're trying to learn about, those skills are not emphasized and taught very much. And yet that's really what media literacy is all about. It's about learning to learn. It's about having a process for learning and for evaluating the information that you come across.
If we've known about this issue for 50 to 60 years, why does it seem like we're only taking it seriously the last couple years? Why didn't Americans wake up before or come to this term or it became popular? And why is it an issue now, seemingly?
I think that the advent of the internet really made a big difference in the history, because suddenly we have many, many millions of voices on social media.
Mm.
And I gave the reaction to that. The reaction was, oh my Lord, all of these people speaking. And, many of them are communicating what I think of as just, I'm appalled. I believe it. I, I pull over the whole media ecosystem. Therefore, we need to change things so that, we can have more consensus, more agreement.
Mm.
And so I honestly that a lot of the attention for media came through an attempt to control rather than, we like to say in media literacy, we're not about covering information, we're about uncovering it. And so asking uncover information is really what media literacy. And then you mentioned earlier about the concepts that are shown on this chart, and those concepts describe how media works. And, media don't work in a way that's going to necessarily generate consensus, or, where you're going to have a uniformity of opinion. Quite the opposite.
So we used to have three television networks. Now we have everybody's got seemingly their own channel. That's not necessarily a problem. We're starting to listen to everybody, and some people are being overwhelmed by that. But it's not wrong to have all these voices participating. And so we'll just have to evolve to live in this new environment with more voices. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is. Because, first of all, you have to believe in people.
Mm.
You have to believe in the concept of democracy, where people are free to have their own opinions and make their own choices. Now, I'm certainly not advocating for anarchy, but by the same token, we do have to have fundamental respect for people's intelligence, for their making good decisions for themselves and their families and their communities. And that's fundamentally the premise that our country has been founded on. And so it's, I think, kind of ironic that now that we have a more democratic um, voice system through media, that some people want to control it more than ever.
It seems that way. I remember being in college and they were like, the internet's here and it's going to be a wild frontier and everybody's going to have access to information and there'll be no gatekeepers. And I'm like, and I have so many colleagues and friends who say, there's no reason for someone to be ignorant today. You can just go on Google and type it in. And I keep thinking, right. And what if the first 5 search results are all garbage information or fake news? Then, like, how does that help them be more informed? You're just made them more misinformed, not actually informed. So I don't see the internet as this panacea or automatic evolutionary plane that's going to immediately take us to a better place just because it exists. It looks to be a tool, and it's going to be abused by some, and it's going to take others to learn how to push back on that, I think.
Agreed. And, I learned something very interesting when I was in Latvia. I taught in Latvia for 6 months at the University of Latvia and worked quite a bit in the local community through a nonprofit agency there. And of course, Latvia had been part of the communist system for many years and only became a free country in 1990. Um, and so it was fascinating to hear people talk about how the media was so controlled during the Soviet era. And yet, what was also fascinating was to hear how people learned to kind of sort through and read the news on several different levels. There was the official news, and then there was the news that wasn't reported on, and there was the quote unquote reading between the lines. And so people oftentimes did get a lot of information that necessarily didn't come through the official channels. But I think, again, we have to really give people credit for um, really being able to look after their self-interest and to see through a lot of messages. And the real decision often comes in whether to accept a message that you're coming across for whatever reason. And that's a decision. So it's that decision making process that we really hope to help empower people with through media literacy.
It seems like a lot of the Baltic states that are on the border of Russia, former USSR region, are very aware of this media literacy. I keep reading about Finland. They view it as a national security issue to be aware of media literacy and being able to have teach their children how to figure out what's correct or bad information, etc. And I guess maybe they're so ahead of the game because they had to be. They couldn't, right?
Oh, they definitely have had to be. And one example in Latvia, 40% of the people in the capital of Latvia, which is Riga, are Russian speaking, of Russian descent.
Right.
So, when you think about something like that, even from a demographic standpoint, then understanding media, understanding your engagement with media, understanding the purposes behind media, all of that becomes that much more important. Um, Certainly, it's important here in the United States, but we just haven't had to be on the edge in terms of our own security, and so that definitely makes a difference.
Not in this manner. I think before the Russia hacking of the 2016 election was announced to great fanfare, I think Americans' concept of defense was join the military or let's invest more money in the military. And that was it. And now this says, well, actually, the concept of defense is up to you in your living room every day. Yeah. That was different. That was different.
It is different because for the first time and in a more acute way than probably since World War II, citizens are the first line of defense.
Right. Right.
And there's a real appreciation of that and an acute awareness of how so many people are really unprepared to examine their relationship with media. And so the discipline of media literacy has really come more into focus as a way of really empowering people to be able to deal with media more effectively.
Certainly, Donald Trump pushed fake news routinely. However, it's not like people on the other side are completely immune from this. I remember famously when Joe Biden took over and he said, there were no vaccines till I got here on his Twitter account. And the press had to go, I'm sorry, Mr. President, but that's not true at all. And you have to take that down from the official White House site. Now, did he do that as much as Trump? No. But this concept of, oh, it's just Trump. No. We've seen everybody make boo-boos like this. And maybe it'd be good for you to always think of these 5 questions, no matter what the source of media is. Is that fair?
That's very fair because certainly in terms of asking questions and being skeptics. Now, mind you, I'm not saying to be cynical because cynics believe the worst. We don't want to be worse, but at the same time, that skepticism is healthy and it needs to be ever present because we're human. And so I don't care what your party is. I don't care what your politics are, what your religion is, whatever your background is. We are all subject to being human, to having our biases, to having our beliefs. And all of those need to be questioned when we're dealing with big decisions in our lives and with the media.
It reminds me, I'm not sure if it was the 1990s or early 2000s, but I remember being a kid and you used to just buy what was in the store based upon the front label and if it looked good on TV. And then there was this movement to start reading the labels on the packaging of the food and start seeing what's in it. And it worked. It took about 5 to 10 years. And you would think that's silly. Weren't you guys doing? But no, people weren't really doing it until there was this kind of social movement to go turn the thing around and read what's on the back of it. And they didn't say so that you could get rid of frosted flakes and so that we could get rid of sweet soda. They just said, know what you're consuming. And because of that, consumers became better consumers. They became more sophisticated consumers. They started to see, I don't want your super sugary version. Sales for the super sugary version are dropping. Sales for the less sugary version are starting to go up. That wasn't forced. Nobody forced that. The government didn't say you will stop making that cereal. The public didn't say we're going to, chase you at your house and surround you and protest. It was just better educated consumers gradually started shifting and the market had to adjust. And I think what you said is if we had better educated citizens who could better absorb the media, they would become better sophisticated customers of the media.
Right.
And the media may have to step up its game because it has a more sophisticated client base now.
Yes, exactly. Because again, it's people who make meaning. It's people who form their opinions and make their judgments and make their decisions based on the information that they access and also that they share. So, in making for a better consumer, producer, participant with media, automatically there is a demand then for them to be able to find the kind of information that they really want. And if they're demanding higher quality information, more than likely, that's what they're going to get.
Makes sense. I think I was talking with someone else about this, and I said they used to make really violent movies, and then somewhere in the late 80s, they started a campaign on, as Americans, we shouldn't consume so many violent movies. And the consumers started not wanting to go see the new blockbuster, which has, 50,000 people gunned down, and they would go for something that was more like action adventure-y. And Hollywood had to follow suit because there was an awareness of the public, like, we shouldn't be consuming this. I like violent action movies, but the idea was good, is that you shouldn't every single movie consuming this every minute of the day. That's not good. Nobody forced it. Nobody criticized someone, but the consumers became better consumers, and Hollywood adjusted. And now we don't have, if you look at the movies that come out now compared to the movies coming out in the 1980s, it's very, very different. There was just as gory as you could possibly be, let's go for it. And now we don't do that as much.
Yes.
I'm not saying there's not gory movies out there, but the customer base is just not up for it like it used to be in the 80s. So we know we can do this. We've seen examples of this. How long do you think it will take for us to get a good chunk? I don't know. I'm not going to name a percentage, a good chunk of people to start getting in on this. For example, I have yet to hear, and I could be ignorant on this. That's why I'm talking to you. Could be ignorant. I have yet to hear any well-known politician say it's not about fake news. It's not about my side being right or their side being wrong. It's about all of us being better consumers with the news and asking these 5 questions. How long till we get to a point where this is kind of a popular idea, in your opinion? I understand that's asking you to guess with straws and, half a mirror and charms, but most people have no idea. They're hearing this idea. Is this something we could wrap up in 2 weeks? Is this a 50-year project? Did Donald Trump put the idea that our head that now this is important and Americans are coalescing around this idea, or are we still kind of muddling through this?
Well, I think we have a lot of evidence that this approach works. And we also know from our experience in teaching media literacy that really even a 3-hour workshop can make a huge difference. Or doing a short advertising campaign around the questions and concepts, and raising awareness. And so it doesn't need to take 18 years of education to hopefully help someone become media literate. It doesn't take that at all. On the other hand, though, if we're looking at systemic change and changing the education system, I'll just share with you a quick story in that when I first got into the field almost 25 years ago now, um, one of my fellow academics said, gee, I think it's going to take at least 50 years for some of this change to come to the education system. And I was shocked because I came out of a corporate background where, change management is a discipline,
right,
where companies know how to affect change and make it happen quickly if they need to. And so it was really difficult. And now I can tell myself. And in terms of the, I think turning around a lot more quickly, but I probably another 25 years, another 35 years. I mean, for truly, which is at the center of education, not periphery. I think it's going to take a lot of time and commitment. But I do also see that we've made progress, and there are some countries out there that are really integrating media literacy into their education system more rapidly.
So you've had conversations with other educators before, and some of them were pessimistic, and that shocked you initially. And maybe it will take a while, but hey, it's only an afternoon. In one afternoon, you could change someone around. So it's not like this takes years to do. And whatever the view is here, however pessimistic it is, the fact remains other countries have done this. Other countries have gotten their people to go, we need to do this. And they got everybody. I'm sure not everybody. I'm sure there's the guy in the corner going, I'm not going to do it. But, the bulk of the country, every country's got their crazy uncle in the corner, right? But most of them are like, we need to do this and we can do this. And then they did it within a few years, not 50 years, not a decade, not even 5 years. Sounds like 1 to 3. They at least got a good chunk maybe not everybody, but they went from, boy, we're really not doing this, to a good chunk of the population was doing this in a couple.
Well, I can't say that I would go there in terms of looking at a lot of countries. Definitely, it's the minority, but there are countries who have definitely been very serious about incorporating media literacy. So, for example, France. France has uh, an an agency called Clemi that handles media literacy throughout the country.
Hmm.
And so a very robust program. In Great Britain, they have Ofcom, which is their media regulator. And their Ofcom has a very robust program for media literacy, and they're really trying to spread it throughout the population. So they're very active. When you look at Sweden, um, they also have a very active program, and Finland is probably the most. So definitely, we see examples in the EU, and there are programs going on all over the world. You know, I'm in regular touch with people in Southeast Asia and Africa, in South America. So the awareness is definitely rising, but it's not to the level where it really needs to be in terms of being integrated into the education systems of the various countries.
Is there some sort of external shock that could happen to America that you could see to get us really motivated to do this quickly? Or is it just do what you can and let's all try to get this moving as best as we can?
Hmm, interesting. Well, I think we did have some shocks, and I think that's what's even propelled it into any kind of national consciousness. So it has taken some shocks to even get to this point, but I do believe that um, we're seeing some really horrific results as a result of COVID, for example, and having to resort to only online learning and the school shutdowns and so on. That's another kind of shock that I think is an argument for media literacy education because uh, all of a sudden teachers are forced to deal with through using media, and certainly media literacy should be an important part of that type of education. And we also have a huge teacher shortage that's happening. And our education system is going through some shock. And I think we're going to have to re examine the way that we organize our education system and the way that we deliver education. And as we move to this more online, networked, global kind of system, then I think that's actually going to work in favor of media literacy.
Yeah, yeah. I remember 10 years ago learning that many employers, I think a majority of corporations, were complaining that all the college graduates coming out of the schools didn't have critical thinking. They
I,
knew engineering, they knew finance, they knew computer science, they knew medicine, couldn't think for themselves worth a damn. I looked it up recently. It's still like 60% of corporations saying, you guys don't pump out critical thinkers at all. And I remember being in high school, and I was there the last year they had debate and civic and government. And then the year I graduated, they cut all those, no more civics, no more government, no more debate. We're focusing on STEM. And I'm like, which is good. But at the same time, maybe we lost something really important. Because when I look at Finland, a key part of their ability to push back on this is they teach all their kids critical thinking. I mean, that is enforced. You will know how to think for yourself. And if you're going to graduate from our colleges, you better damn well know how to do it. We don't do anything like that in America. We don't
no,
even have that as an issue to be concerned about in America.
no, it really isn't front and center in terms of our education, in the sense of, for example, I mean, hear all the time, teach critical thinking, teach critical thinking. Well, how? All of the standards, for the most part, are based on content standards. That's learning a particular subject like math or like
Thank
science.
you.
Again, I'm not knocking. We need that.
We're not knocking it at all.
No, no. But what you're saying is right on, because what we haven't incorporated then are some easy ways for teachers to teach critical thinking. And that's why learning a process of inquiry, like we have with our core concepts and key questions, learning to ask questions, learning to have discussion, learning to listen, having a vocabulary for expression, being able to use all forms of media for expression. Those are the kinds of things that you have to do when you're in the workforce and when you're, regardless of what you're doing. And so these are the skill sets that really have been neglected. We don't have standards, education standards for process skills. And yet, process skills are what are going to make us lifelong learners who are able to continue learning and adapting and flexing. So, definitely, that's why I say that we need some reorganization in terms of priorities and how many minutes of the day are spent on what. And definitely, we need to take a good hard look at how every day is spent. And we need far more emphasis on process skills as well as the content knowledge.
Are we as a society in 2023 any better off deciphering media, not being misled, than we were in 2016? I mean, it really wasn't on the radar until 2016. It's 7 years later. You work in the field. Can you say it's not where we want it to be, but definitively Americans are way better off than 2016 at getting this? Or is that not something we could really say?
Well, I would say the awareness level is definitely heightened. For example, people know now, I think most people know, oh, you can't believe everything that you see in a video or that you hear or that you read. I think there is a level of awareness about that really didn't exist so much before. But in terms of having the skills, in terms of really understanding, how do you how do you go through this exercise? How do you think critically about something? What are some ways that you can do that? I don't think we're very much better off than we were before, if at all.
I,
So,
yeah, I wonder. I mean, because I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, which it shouldn't have done, but they don't. I watch YouTube videos and go, "This comes from Russia TV. It's state sponsored. You need to think about that." And I go, "Well, that's a good message." And then it comes out that CNN has basically a revolving door with Pentagon generals where they take contracts to appear on CNN for the next 1 to 3 years. And then they just call them and go, "We need you to come on TV and talk about this." These generals know what the audience wants to hear, and they want to keep the contract, and they're retired. This is covered by the New York Times. And I'm like, that's kind of state sponsored media, right? We have people in the government and they have this incestuous relationship backdoor behind our eyes with the media, where it's kind of a revolving door. I work in the government, then I speak on media, then I work for the media, then I go back to working in the government, and all the time I'm repeating what everybody wants me to say. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like independent reporting to me, and that's totally cool in America.
well, there's been a really unfortunate trend toward different cable channels, toward newspapers, toward any media outlet really taking more sides than what they did in the past. And it's acknowledged, it's not any secret. um, but but at the same time, um, you get into the whole notion of who's doing the speaking, who's controlling, who's behind this, and what's the purpose. And so certainly we've seen a lot of pushback now um, after COVID, for example, about um, uh, different opinions about the origins of the virus
Right.
being suppressed, for example.
True.
So I think that when we have some concrete examples like that people are aware of, it certainly does. Well, first of all, it undermines trust in the government spokespeople. And the other thing is, though, that it certainly gives credence to the idea of more opinions are better. Because when you think about labeling as misinformation or disinformation, you're censoring. And those voices were often censored. And so I think that we've got to be really careful about not seeing something like media literacy as being about suppressing disinformation and misinformation, because that's censorship and it's dangerous.
You taught me that when we were talking earlier. I was like, this is about this. You're like, no, it is not about that. It is about learning to live with the information better.
Yes.
That sounds good. And I could see that with COVID. I had a lot of friends and I didn't believe everything they said, and I still don't. But they would say a couple things and then they get banned on Facebook and Twitter and going, this is misinformation and it's dangerous and people are going to die from it. And I'm like, see? And then sure enough, 6 months later, they go, hey, Mark, here's an article from the Associated Press saying everything I said. Now they're saying it's true. 6 months ago, I was a horrible human being spreading misinformation to get people killed. Now it's totally true. By the way, I never got an apology from Facebook and my account is still down. I know
Yeah.
many people who live like that and they have absolutely no faith in the media either. And I'm telling them, you need to have more faith. But it's hard for me to argue that when they were told, how dare you say that fact? We will punish you. Then it comes out to be true. And there's no, whoops, when we said you were a bad person for saying that fact, maybe we were wrong. Sorry. It's just, don't bring it up, keep moving. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. You don't get to roll over me, say I'm a horrible human, and then say, actually, what you said was true, and then act me like me to not forget it. They're never going to forget that.
No, our Center for Media Literacy has a Facebook page, and we were censored on it one time for some kind of an article that we shared. And honestly, I don't even remember the details of it now. But, we were informed that this would not be shared, and that we would be contacted about the reasons why and blah, blah. Never heard a word. I mean, that was the end of it, and it was done. And
Exactly.
so this is where I believe that as citizens, we really need to be very careful about the labeling, about how we handle misinformation, disinformation, how we handle our own data, for heaven's sake. And I really do see this as a very important issue for media literacy, because, you know, once we start censoring, we definitely put someone else in charge of making the decisions about.
Slow clap, like in the 80s movies. That is brilliant. Not many people saying that. I think that's brilliant. And I
Yes.
can already see the effects. I'll talk to professors on the right, I'll talk to professors on the left, and I will occasionally go, well, what about this? And a good chunk of the time, you can see their eyes get really big. And they're going, oh, God, you're going to talk about a conspiracy theory, right? And they're thinking that because they never heard it on the TV channels that they read. And yet it's a fact. It's from the Associated Press. It's from Reuters. It's from the International Climate Change Commission. Never heard of it. So, oh my God, this guy's spreading lies. I mean, and it's a lot of professors are automatically trained, in my opinion, that if they haven't heard about that news, immediately assume it's conspiracy theory. And it
Mhm.
wasn't. These were verifiable facts. And I've had at least 30 people look at me like I was spreading craziness when I go, I'm sorry, this is from Reuters. The Associated Press, this is not Fox News. This is not Breitbart. I don't know why you didn't hear it, but this is a mainstream source. I don't know what to tell you. And it's like, well, I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to comment on that. Okay, so they don't know the facts. And if it wasn't on their channel, they won't even recognize or admit the facts to even have a conversation about it because it wasn't on their channel. So therefore, something has to be wrong with it. And I go, I don't know why CNN, MSNBC didn't pick up an article from the Associated Press or Reuters or the International Association of Journalists. I don't know, but I know those aren't Russian disinformation arms. Those are reputable groups. I don't know what to tell you. And if I can't answer that question, then it's not really worth knowing, Mark. Yeah, it's probably just garbage. I'll move on.
Yes. And I would really question the word reputable there, because again, you know, whose definition? By whose definition? And, you know, I think that those are reputations that need to be earned. And again, they're not going to be perfect. There's no perfect information. So I think we have to use extreme caution with these labels, with the idea that we can determine misinformation and disinformation. I'm not saying that we shouldn't estimate what we think, and this is why risk management, you know, we definitely can assign some probability to the accuracy or factuality of a particular news item. But you know, whether it's news or whether it's diet information, like you mentioned earlier, you know, regardless of what the subject is, it's all subject to scrutiny. It should be, because again, how do we know? And really, the only way is by trying to educate ourselves as much as we can about, you know, trust and about how credible a particular news organization or company or government agency is over time.
When we talked towards the end, when I was really zeroing in and understanding what you're saying about how we need to deal with this, I recalled the book by Eric Fromm. It's called Escape from Freedom. And he was a German who got out, and he talked about, you know, why did everybody in Germany go crazy? And what he found out was people were just overwhelmed with information and decisions. Germany kind of turned into a democracy the first time, late 20s, early 30s, and there was newspapers, and it just overwhelmed people. And then things got bad. So you were under stress and you were overwhelmed. And then this guy comes and goes, I know the answer. It's not this, it's this. It's very clear, distinct, easy to understand, and I got an answer for everything. And Eric Fromm in Escape from Freedom said, people loved it. People loved not being free. We think that everybody wants freedom, and that's true, but people also like to be free from having to make decisions and free from having to determine what's the right information and free from having to go, I don't know what the fact is. And they enjoy that. And I look at social media and the media, and they're built into Fox News versus MSNBC, and they both seem a little bit of Americans looking for that thing Germans were looking for in 1939. I want a source of information that's unambiguous, no nuance. I don't want to hear facts that kind of contradict. I want to hear a clean, simple narrative that makes sense to me and answers all my questions. And as long as you give me that, I will be there every single night because it brings me comfort. And I think that's what led to Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Am I wild for crazy for thinking that?
I don't think you're wild or crazy at all for thinking that. People are extremely uncomfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. And many people will go to great extremes to eliminate ambiguity and uncertainty. And so part of what we have a responsibility to do in helping our citizens cope is to understand about ambiguity and uncertainty, understand more about risk. And there are upsides and downs. You know, there's a lot in between that you can decide, and that you, by deciding, can definitely have more control then over that uncertainty and ambiguity. So I think that that's a really important piece of this notion that different people have different beliefs, different experiences. And by having more of an exchange about that, first of all, we recognize our humanity. But secondly, we realize that, there are a lot of choices to be made. And and there's certainly a lot of uncertainty, but by the same token, we can find our way through it. We need to help people's confidence in dealing uh, with that kind of ambiguity that we're all surrounded with every day.
And maybe if we actually trained ourselves in an educated manner to handle that much information, which it sounds like we're not doing, we could be a lot better off.
Right.
Right.
I know because people be exposed to many ideas and many kinds of people, many different. And I think in doing that, you learn that we have so much in common.
Mm.
I've worked from all over the world with media, and one of the fascinating things to me is that, yeah, the local issues, the political themes, the problems of the countries, they're all different and they're very local. But the process skills of media literacy apply no matter where you are, no matter what country, no matter what language. And the reason is they're human. We're all human. And so learning how to uh, question, learning more, learning how to dive the situation and estimate what's my stake. Those are human skills. And those are things that can be taught and encouraged and nurtured from a very all over. So that's tremendous that media provide hope toward alleviating all of- alleviating some of the kinds of conflict that can so easily arise when people don't understand and they're being encouraged to kind of do battle verbally.
So media literacy skills are things we can teach around the world to everybody.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of that. I think that's what you're saying. Okay. Okay. I will offer a solution that they looked at in, I think it was 1800s England.
Mm-hmm.
They started to have these people used to weave sweaters and weave fabrics together. And then someone came out with the automated linen thing where it just, made the cotton do this and they were able to push out shirts. And there was this group called the Luddites
Yes.
who praised King Lud, who was a fake person, and they went and just smashed all the machines in order to take things back. So, what if we just, break the internet and make the internet go away? That would make everything work, right? I mean, they tried this in 1800s England. I'm sure it worked out great. Is that a solution here? We can just travel back in time, get rid of the internet, and everything will go perfect?
No, no, of course not. And, what we need to revamp is our education system and our way of looking at what we should be teaching and focusing on and learning. Um, because we're not preparing people for the world that they're living in. It's not about taking in as much content as you possibly can and remembering it because it's all on the internet. So how do you learn about the things that are important, that are going to have an impact on your everyday life? And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have biology or history or whatever. But, by the same token, I'm also saying that, as an everyday citizen, um, I'm probably personally not going to use calculus. And personally, I don't need to know the name of every species of tree in order to have some competency in biology. So what I'm saying is that we need to take a different look at what we're teaching, because it's not about imprinting on the minds of our young people everything that's been learned through the century. Instead, it's about understanding how they can find that information, how they can determine whether that is good, valid information, how they can make judgments.
How they can make judgments based upon the volume of information they're taking in. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Last two questions. You're not you. You're not me. You're a third-party person watching this video. They learned a lot. I learned a lot. And I'm proud to say that I was ignorant about a couple things and you educated on me. Thank you. That's why I do this series. Thank you.
For being open.
I had my understanding corrected, and I feel better informed now. And I want to say thank you to that. A third-party person's watching this. There was a lot of material. They're struggling to remember it all, but there was one thing the speaker said that they can't get out of their head 5 days after watching this video. What would that one thought be?
Ask questions.
That is the shortest response of the entire series. The award goes to you.
and I've already said we have 5 key questions that are evident, by the way. We have evaluated these questions with in a longitudinal study, and we have shown that by children, these were middle school students, by learning to ask these questions and understand these concepts, that we had a positive impact on the students' knowledge, on their attitudes, and on their behaviors.
That's excellent. Last question. You don't have to answer. We always ask, do you know anybody who might be willing to be part of this conversation? We always ask for recommendations, try to keep the conversation going. You don't have to name anybody, but we always ask, is there anybody you think they could be in media literacy, they could be in political polarization, who might be willing to be part of this conversation?
Do you want somebody only in the U.S., or are you open to
anywhere in the world? We've interviewed people from Australia and I think a guy from Belgium 2 weeks ago.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm thinking about people whom I think are really, clear thinkers, and a number of people come to mind, actually. And I don't know whether they would do it or not, but I want to tell you, I think it would be fantastic if you could talk to one of the public diplomacy people at NATO that worked with me on my project.
Okay.
They're very smart. They really, I think, have a good sense of the field and where it belongs. So what I should do is probably put together a couple of names and send you their email information. And any of the names that I send you, you can definitely use the name and tell them that we've talked, that I am very comfortable in suggesting that they speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you. We will do a straightforward show. I think you've seen we don't do gotcha journalism.
No.
Because everybody else is doing it. I didn't want to do what everybody else is doing. I wanted to be something that I know it's not going to happen just like I wanted, but I was hoping to get something that people on the left and right could watch and learn together. And people could just walk away going, you didn't change my mind, but I feel more educated about where we are and why we're there. That's the whole point.
Oh gosh, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because one of the concerns I have with media literacy right now is to be sure, and certainly with our organization, we really try to walk a line in terms of being nonpartisan. I do not want to go there in terms of taking sides, because that's really not, excuse me, that's really not what this is about. It should definitely be nonpartisan because it's education. You know, we're talking about empowering people, not telling them what to think or what to believe. And that's why I want to be thoughtful about the people that I suggest to you, because, you know, the people I have in mind are definitely people who get that and who understand media literacy on a deeper level. So I would definitely, I'll send you their names, but Nicola DeSantis is one of the senior level policymakers at NATO in the public diplomacy division. Damien Arnaud is reports to Nicola, but also really um, fine person and very knowledgeable. So I can definitely send you their names. If you haven't already been talking with people, Renee Hobbs is a very well-respected colleague at the University of Rhode Island. She's actually doing a program right now for the Department of Security called Courageous Rhode Island. And I think you'd find it useful to speak with her. And let me think. Depending on if you want more information about OFCOM and the efforts in England, I also work with the Bournemouth University, and the professor there, Julian McDougall, is very savvy and does media literacy programs internationally. He's very well versed. So
Where's he at?
he's at the Bournemouth University in England.
Okay.
If you wanted to speak with somebody who's a regulator in OFCOM, I can definitely refer you to some people. Again, I how wide you want to cast your net. Those
I want to cast it as big as possible. So I'll talk to anybody that's capable, because, you know, only some of them are going to have the time or capability, but I like to
yeah.
reach out to everybody. So
Okay.
we'll leave it there. Just if you're willing, I'll send you a copy of the video, or send me whatever names you have, and I'll reach out to everybody. Very respectful, very professional. And I really, really, really appreciate the references.
Well, you're more than welcome. I think it's so important to really provide a picture of media literacy as empowerment. You know, that to me is what it's really about. And um, and so I'm very disappointed actually with the people who are trying to reduce it to just sorting through misinformation and disinformation. That's only a sliver of what it's really about.
That
So,
was the thing that you corrected me on, and I appreciate that.
yeah, that's something so important. It goes well beyond that. Really about understanding yourself, your city, how you belong in the culture, how you engage.
How you engage with the culture. Absolutely. We'll leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you. This will end the interview, and I'll email you shortly. And I appreciate everything. Thank you for coming up.
You're so welcome, and thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation. You asked great questions, and it was fun to be able to say it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. This is it, and I'm going to email you shortly.
Okay, I'll be in touch with the names. All righty.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Okay.